Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ILN Talk Show, a free space to discuss different developments in Muslim majority countries and beyond. Today is our 19th episode, and we're happy to have with us the Islam Liberty Network CEO, Mr. Ali Salman. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Tasnim, for having me again.
Yes, again, because you were my guest on the 9th episode when we were talking about your book, Islam and Economics. And we also talked again at the 10th episode of the ILN Talk Show when we discussed about the OIC conference that took place in Islamabad in March 2022. So it's like a year, exactly a year from now. And today we're going to be talking about something still related to economy, but we're going to be discussing Pakistan's economic and political crisis. I think they haven't benefited from the book you published, unfortunately.
Hardly have people read it here.
Okay, so let's just start right away. So a very straightforward question would be, how accurate would that be to say that the Pakistani crisis, political crisis, started when the Pakistani opposition, joined hands and submitted a no-confidence motion against former Prime Minister Imran Khan's government in the National Assembly? So would that be accurate that this is what really started the political crisis that was followed by the economic crisis?
Yeah, I think historically that's a fair statement to make, but it has to be contextualized. Obviously, in Pakistan, we are hearing the word or phrase regime change to mark that change of the government. Although technically speaking, legally speaking, constitutionally speaking, there was nothing wrong with the change of the prime minister, change of the government by a vote of confidence. So in strictly in that sense, the move was constitutional. But what happened after that move, or also I think along with that move, Pakistan was already in an IMF program, and there was discussion about program continuity, and the former government had made some commitments to the IMF, which it was not following. It announced freezing of petroleum prices, for instance. So there were two movements. Economic crisis was setting in, but then the political crisis, which was not directly related with the economics. It was more of the political move from the opposition also set in and brought the new government. Since it's a coalition government now in Pakistan, 13 political parties, the management of the coalition, very different ideologically, very different parties are together in the cabinet. And the political and the economic system have faced significantly much more instability in the last 1 year or so than we were witnessing in the previous time.
So it's not a problem of a chicken and egg problem. So it's not a matter of who came first, which one came first, the political crisis or the economic crisis. I think from what you're saying, the economic crisis was there already, but the political crisis has, much roots before it, right?
That's right. I mean, my understanding, and I think many people from Pakistan would also agree that the crisis was deep rooted, and the crisis were rooted in the sense of how Pakistani politicians and Pakistani establishment, particularly the military establishment, and their relationship. And when he was prime minister, Imran Khan had enjoyed strong support from the military establishment, which was a well-known fact now, since the army chief has also retired, the former army chief, and he has made public statements saying that. But then various events, took place within that space, within that relationship.
Right.
between the civilian government and the military leadership, which contributed to this lack of harmony at that level. And at that time, I think the opposition parties saw that space, saw that window as an opportunity to strike, because even Imran Khan did not have a clear, like a significant majority in the parliament,
Mhm.
and his government was also dependent on some coalition partners. So the situation was fragile in a sense to say, but the government was carrying on. But then, since when that support sort of was taken back, I think the political in a political sense, in a democratic setup, then the government lost support. Uh,
So, if we go a little bit back in time, what has this economic and political crisis have to do with former Prime Minister Sharif? Did it start with him, or did it only start with former Prime Minister Imran Khan? Is it deeply rooted in the history of Pakistan, or is it something new?
It is actually deeply rooted, but let me just go back not too far. Let me go back to 2008. What happened in 2008? General Pervez Musharraf, who recently died, may God bless his soul, and he was Pakistan. In recent history, there was the last military dictator,
Right.
and around that time, Pakistan People's Party, the Bhutto's party, and Pakistan Muslim League, the Nawaz Sharif party, had signed an agreement. It is called Charter of Democracy. Basically, these political parties were saying that we will follow the democratic and constitutional norms. We will not be a part of any conspiracy against each other. If a party wins the election, it should be made a part of the, it should form the government, and we will sit in the opposition. And these two parties then completed two terms since 2008 to 2018,
Mm-hmm.
5 years each. However, in the end of the second term, the term of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who is now in self-exile in London, there was a court case in the context of Panama corruption,
Yeah.
and he was disqualified by the court, not on, by the way, not on Panama case, but on the pretext of a very, I would say, dubious kind of judicial interpretation, in which he was declared as an employee of a firm which was his son's firm, and he was supposed to take some salary, which he did not take. But then there was a lot of technical detail, but ultimately he was disqualified. And another prime minister from his party was made the prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
But that change is since 2018. Then there was another general election, and then the Imran Khan party became the single largest majority party, and they formed the government with the help of some regional political parties. But that change was not accepted, although it was as a result of the elections. But Sharif's party kept on saying that the whole judicial intervention was driven by conspiracy,
Right.
and the military was behind it, and now it is generally believed that it was true. I mean, so it has become quite open now. So there was these tensions in the air while Imran Khan was the prime minister. But while he was the prime minister for about 3.5 years, what happened that there was, because his campaign promise was accountability.
Okay.
It was less to do with the development or economy. It was that Sharifs and Bhutto are corrupt, and I am the honest, and so I will clean Pakistani politics from corruption, and so a lot of his time was spent in fighting court cases, accountability cases, and many opposition leaders,
Mm-hmm.
for one reason or another reason, went into jail.
Right.
And that whole process was perceived largely political rather than legal, and that meant essentially that the political environment in Pakistan was not a stable environment. And then we come back to just 1 year ago when the opposition saw an opportunity. The relationship between Pakistan's military establishment and Pakistan's civil leadership
Mm-hmm.
got sour, and that was the window which was exploited by the opposition
Right.
to dislodge the Prime Minister Imran
Yeah.
Khan.
So definitely it has some roots in the history of Pakistan. It's not something that emerged, something new. But some people argue that the root cause of Pakistan's economic crisis is the excessive external borrowings by the country over the years. So this caused the currency to fall and made imports more expensive in relative terms. So by June 2022, when the crisis started, inflation was already high, along with the rising food prices, etc. To what extent do you think this is accurate?
Yeah, I mean, economic crisis is much more complex than this. But if we don't go back too far, the current economic crisis started from largely fiscal irresponsibility of the previous government. When Pakistani, as consumers, we pay petroleum as per the international prices,
Yes.
and we have to import almost 80% of our petrol or from other countries, which and is not just for transport. It also runs our significant portion of our power plants,
Okay.
which means that our economy largely depends on continuous supply of fuel. And when the government announced that we're going to fix the prices while we are in an IMF program, that was not something which Pakistan government, fiscally speaking, from a budgetary point of view, could afford. It was a political and populist slogan to begin with. So imagine that Pakistani government had earmarked about 500 billion rupees as subsidies. But when this money was, of course, when the price was not fully transferred to the customers,
Yeah.
the government had to pay for the difference. And that subsidy budget went to 1.5 trillion rupees, almost triple. And that's something which was already setting a crisis, because the government wanted into an election mode. They wanted people to be happy, and that started the crisis. The fiscal crisis is the root cause. And of course, when we talk about the fiscal crisis, we talk about the spending, but we also talk about the taxation. So you mentioned about the debts, because we were taking a lot of debts. There's no doubt in that. And but then in the last few years, most of the debt which we contracted were for debt repayment rather than starting any new programs of development or productive use of the debt itself. So there, the fiscal problem is there. But let me quickly address the inflation problem which you
Okay.
mentioned rightly. Pakistan is currently about 45% inflation rate, which is the worst we have seen in last 50 years.
Wow.
Uh, and there is definitely a deepening of economic crisis now. And the exchange rate has depreciated significantly because of what happened. There are various explanations, of course. I mean, what I'm saying may not be, and not everyone would agree with it. I think a lot to do with the current government economic policies. So Sharif Shehbaz Sharif, the younger brother of the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, his view of the government and his finance ministers failed to handle the economy properly. And they continued the downturn which the previous finance minister of Imran Khan started. And we already had soon seen two finance ministers. And what they're doing, they are controlling the imports artificially. So they banned certain imports, saying they are luxury imports.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of ships, containers, thousands of containers, which were at Karachi airport, Karachi seaport,
Yeah.
and could not be cleared into the country. And so the industry got stuck, the raw materials got stuck, the chemicals, all things, spare parts. And so we went into an industrial production crisis. We went into a raw material crisis, and we are seeing now unemployment because, of course, the industry is closing down. The auto industry is closing down. The textile industry is closing down, has closed down. Um, Poultry industry. So when you have a problem and when the production goes down and the demand is still there, like people still want to drive cars or eat their foods,
Definitely. Yeah.
and we are not getting the same quantity, and we are, and so the resultant crisis of inflation is driven by not just a fiscal one, but now the trade controls have largely contributed to the current crisis. And it is, I think, very fair to say that Pakistan has not seen this intensity of economic crisis in its history.
So, in the light of this serious situation, what are the possible scenarios for the future to, solve the problem, if ever it could be solved, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, there was one thing in which everyone was agreeing was that Pakistan has to remain in the IMF program, and Pakistan has to win back IMF confidence, which it has lost totally, unfortunately, because of these measures which successive governments or finance ministers rather have taken in the last 1.5 year. The international lenders, which Pakistan has to depend on, have lost confidence in the credibility of the government to make promise and to sign a program. And so the immediate first step has to be restoration of that confidence, restoration of the what is called staff level agreement.
Right.
So we're just waiting. We're just waiting for the news. IMF has made several demands, and by the way, government of Pakistan has, to be fair, has accepted demands like increase of electricity tariff, increase of the exchange rate is now market driven,
Mm-hmm.
and import restrictions have been lifted lately.
Okay.
So actually we are seeing that. But if you stop import for 6 months, it will take a lot of time for businesses to get
Recover.
realigned and recover, because it's a continuous flow. You stop one day, you stop a factory for a day. To restart a factory, it cannot be done in one day.
Definitely.
It take weeks, and so that kind of problem is there. Now we are seeing that government is taking those steps, but a lot of damage has been done. And
Mm-hmm.
so going
So,
forward, in the short run, IMF program has to be back. Pakistan has to be back in the program. But then that's also a very, very narrow window we have, by the way. I mean, even if IMF comes tomorrow, Pakistan is not going to make, Pakistan is not going to honor its commitment for external debt obligation in next 1 year. So what
mm-hmm.
happens? That Pakistan has to go to friendly countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and
Are they
China.
still friendly, politically
So
speaking?
they
Because
have remained.
it gets affected with politics from both
Yes,
sides.
I mean, absolutely right. I mean, they are still friendly. Largely, we have enjoyed good relationship with these countries. But what is a new thing is these countries are saying Pakistan needs to fix its house first. We cannot continue to bail out Pakistan's economy like these countries, especially China has done, Saudi Arabia has done, UAE has done in last few
Mm-hmm.
years, continuing to bail out. either by deposit of dollars or credit supplies of petroleum. So this is all going, but these countries are now have become very reluctant. And why they have become reluctant? There is a lot of international politics, of course, around in this region.
Yeah.
Russia-Ukraine war is going on, and so every country wants to secure their interest, and
First. Yeah.
that's what is going on. And so it's so IMF is also now again this is something which it didn't happen before. IMF wants a letter from these countries that they these countries will also extend their support.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
it's quite a now chicken and egg situation now because these countries want an IMF letter and the IMF wants these countries letter.
Yeah,
So
but going back to
and
the
we don't
IMF.
want anyone doing that. Yeah.
So from what I understood, your solution would be to get the IMF back and to gain its trust back. But you're surely aware that a lot of people think that the problem is, submitting to IMF from the first place. So they think IMF is the problem. So the interference of IMF. So what do you respond to these people? Do you have
So this is
do
a
they
very
even have the luxury to, give up on IMF?
short answer is no. But the slightly longer answer is that this is a very popular explanation of economic crisis that IMF has caused this problem and that problem,
Yeah.
and not just Pakistan, but many countries. I mean, your country, Tunisia, is facing similar crisis, and I think similar kind of negotiations are going on with IMF,
Definitely.
uh,
Yeah.
and parallel political crisis is going on in Tunisia also. So that's a situation we are in.
It's the whole
But
recipe. They all come together. Yeah.
yeah, but no, we don't have to always be remain in IMF program at all. It is just an emergency, financial balance of payment help. So it has an international mandate. I always give one example, and that is our favorite country, India. That India, Pakistan had balance of payment problem back in 1991.
Yeah.
So both countries went into IMF program
Right.
because they did not have the sufficient reserves
Yeah.
or flows of dollars to meet their obligations.
Uh-huh.
But then Pakistan was only half-hearted. Like Pakistan went into the program for 6 months, it implemented some conditions, it improved situation, and then we went back to our habits of extra spending and not doing enough taxation reforms, and all kind of problems. India has not gone back to IMF since 1991. What it did for it took reform seriously. It committed to liberalization. It attracted FDI. It improved its governance. It improved its economic policies, and all the governments since last 30 years or so have followed. There were many governments which changed, and even the political ideologies of different governments they're competing. But on the economy side, they did not make any. They did not. There was no significant shift. I think that is a great example of developing countries,
Mm-hmm.
that once we commit to a program or any reform agenda, let's show that you're serious, and then you don't need it. I mean, and we have gone back to IMF maybe 10 times since that. In total, we have gone to IMF in our history 22 times.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last 30 years already quite many times. So this does not have to happen.
So to summarize, for now, under these circumstances, it's a must to go back to IMF and to win its trust. But in the future, it is possible to stay away from it and do your thing on your own. Does this mean that
Oh,
in
yes.
some does this mean that in some way it's not good to be enslaved to the IMF, because these are the terms, the kind of terms that people are using while accusing IMF is that developing countries are under the might of IMF and IMF itself is controlled by the superpowers and all of that rhetoric.
So this is as you said, this is all rhetoric, and this is not helpful because this rhetoric becomes a part of the political debate very
Yes.
easily. People like to believe that they are being victimized.
Yeah.
People like to believe that, oh, the US, imperial, the West, the colonizers, and all that kind of imagination always comes in. And people, unfortunately, don't want to fix themselves, reform themselves. Governments do not want to do it. And so they have now, a boogeyman, IMF, the West, the US, the superpower. And so it's easy. So the
Yeah.
hard way is the other way. The hard way is what our favorite country, India, has done, right? And so that is the hard way. But okay, we have found an easy way, and that's okay. We will live for today, and then we'll see what happens tomorrow, and that's the easy way. That's what we have adopted,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it is not helping Pakistan that the political crisis. We are back to political crisis. A political crisis has deepened in the meanwhile. Um, as today, I'm sitting in Islamabad. The Supreme Court has, is hearing important cases. It has, went into a disarray on important constitutional questions right now, and there is a lot of uncertainty even in the institutional makeup in the country.
Right.
And so IMF also wants, by the way, other than the economic reforms, IMF also want a stability. I mean, it has to
Political
be assured
stability. Yeah.
that okay, we signed today, and then there comes a new government, let's say in October, and says, hey, we don't recognize IMF, and then it goes back. So it is in the interest of IMF, though, that countries like Pakistan are successful. They should be successfully graduating from these programs, but it is not happening. We saw what happened in Greece, for instance, in EU,
Yes.
it's happening, in Latin America, is happening. So there are also very bad examples of countries being stuck in this vicious cycle of loan dependency. But
Yeah.
my conclusion is that this is more to do with our domestic policies, especially how we treat our taxes, businesses, and less to do with the desire of an external agency or superpower to intervene. They have bigger problems than to actually, the US, for instance, historical high inflation, UK historically high inflation in last 40, 50 years, they have not
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
Energy crisis, Ukraine war. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these problems are much more complex to handle
Yeah.
than
Yeah. So, so
than
the
Pakistan's domestic politics.
Yeah. So the problem resides in not committing to the program of IMF. Then you become a slave to IMF because you did not really abide by the rules that you should have taken. So the problem is in you, not in the other institution, for example. Is that what you're trying to
Yes, I
say?
mean that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There is one counter argument to this position, and let me just put it quickly. And the counter argument is that look, if IMF were that serious to discipline a country like Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it should not just help. Maybe it should just let the country default on its obligation, and then we have seen that, by the way. We have seen a year ago in South Asia in the
Yes.
case of Sri Lanka. So
Yes.
Sri Lanka defaulted, and now they are going their own reform process, and it's another
Mm-hmm.
story. But it is in the interest of IMF that the
Right.
countries under its watch, under the program, should not default.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's a failure of IMF actually. That
Absolutely.
you are there, you are helping, you're dictating policies. Country is going to default. What's going? It's complex. So
That's what
I think that
that's what they're not seeing. We're on the same team. We're not opposites normally. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, so it's not that straightforward, and I would like to see more stricter actions on even of part of IMF, but that's not coming because somehow Pakistan has enjoyed its geopolitical position since ever. I mean, since ever Pakistan was created, Pakistan has
yeah,
enjoyed that position,
very
geography,
very serious one.
and but it is
Yes.
all changing. China is big, big. factor in everything we are seeing in the world now. And China is also Pakistan's, the single largest country in terms of the credit as creditor to China,
Yeah,
to Pakistan.
yeah,
And so it's what it says, how it treats and how it helps or doesn't help Pakistan is also going to impact significantly on
absolutely.
our economic future.
So to conclude, any hope for the future of Pakistan in the light of all of these circumstances?
Well, I remain hopeful in the sense that we are nearing elections, and I'm hopeful that all the political parties and constitutional institutions should abide by the election schedule, the election norms. And I know there is a lot of negativity around in the country right now. There is a lot of pessimism in the country right now about
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands of people have left or leaving the country as in last couple of years. So that's real. Uh, but the hope is that we come through these elections, we change the government, we let the government through electoral process, and then we run this cycle continuously. But at the same time, we have to fix the economy. If we have the elections and if we can't improve the economy, then we're going to be in the deeper trouble.
Yeah.
So the student crisis will continue, and I don't see an immediate crisis from the economic sense. I see resolution of a political crisis, but I don't
Which will
see
lead
clear
on the economy. Yeah.
I don't see clear resolution of the economic crisis.
Okay, but maybe once the political crisis is solved, that would eventually lead to, an improvement in the economic crisis, probably, since they're very much linked.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's conclude this episode. Thank you very much, Ali, for these information. I'm sure that our viewers benefited as much as I did, and see you again in a more hopeful episode and a more hopeful topic.
See you in 1 year's time.
Yeah, most probably. Thank you, Ali. Goodbye.
Thank you, Tasneem.